There are many questions you are faced with every day. We are all searching for answers that will make a real difference in our lives. It's hard to imagine that these answers might be right in front of us. Get ready to discover answers in the Bible with Bayless Conley.
Hi there. I want to tell you something. I don't think it's a coincidence that you're listening to me right now or that you hear my voice right now. There's something in the message that I'm going to share in the next few minutes that's going to help you. Sit yourself down. Let's get into the Word together. Tell you a little story I don't think I've ever shared in church before. I was with a couple friends, actually Jeff Perry and Ben Farrell. Their boys, Taylor and Parker, as well as my two sons, were with us. We were in the backcountry in the high Sierras in a really, really remote region. It's a little lake that you can only find on a topo map. There are no trails to it. It's very arduous and difficult to find your way there. I knew about it because my dad and I discovered it when I was a little boy. And we made our way there. It took 2 full days to get there. And there was no signs that any human being had been there in years upon years. And we made a little camp, and I went around to the other side of this lake, and there was a huge rock slide of giant granite boulders, some of them weighing, multiplied tons, all the way up to the lake's edge. And I took my boots off and waded out in the water a little bit, and I had my fly rod, and I was catching trout. It was serene, quiet, beautiful, and all of a sudden, I heard one of those giant boulders behind me shift. And I turned around, and about 10 feet behind me, there was a good-sized black bear standing on his hind legs, staring at me. He'd been sneaking up on me, and when he got on this one boulder, it shifted under his weight, and then he'd stood up. And so I'm literally, from here to you with this bear. And I have the lake behind me. So I started yelling at the bear. And I guess I had a fair bit of adrenaline going. Without taking my eyes off the bear, I bent down and got some big stones, and I was hitting them together, and the stones were just breaking apart in my hands. I guess there was a lot of energy flowing through me at the moment. And I'm yelling at the bear and breaking these stones, and he's just staring at me. And then the guys in camp across the lake heard me yelling, saw what was happening. They started yelling from the other side of the lake. The bear sort of looked at them and then looked at me, and he stood there for about 1.5 minutes while I'm breaking stones and yelling at him, just deciding what he's going to do. I don't think he'd ever seen a human being before, honestly. And he wasn't quite sure if I was edible or not. And then he slowly got down on all fours, headed up that rock slide, and went up a sheer face and stopped about 100 yards up, looked at me, and came back down straight at me again, and stopped in front of me, and I'm breaking rocks and yelling still. And then he slowly lumbered off, and there was only one way into this area. There was these low manzanita scrubs with a game trail going through, and he started headed for that, and that's the only way back to the camp. And I thought, man, I need to know where this bear goes, because I'm not going to get ambushed on the way back. And so the bear was about 30 yards in front of me, and I started to follow it. And he'd stop, and I'd stop, and he'd look at me, and then he'd keep going, and I'd go on, never took my eyes off him, and he'd stop, and I'd stop. In the process of doing that, I stepped in a rotten log, and I knew I'd hurt myself, but I didn't want to take my eyes off the bear. So I took my bandana off, and without even looking at my leg, I tied it up and just kept following him. And then he went down this steep embankment down into the canyon and was gone. And I got back to camp, and I had a hole about the size of a quarter in the front of my leg and about 1 inch deep with big jagged pieces of wood sticking out of it. And the guys patched me up as good as they could. I never felt a thing. I had so much adrenaline flowing through my body. But that little lake was amazing in several respects, obviously because of the wildlife, but also because of the amazing beauty and solitude, and also because of the fishing. It was amazing. I mean, Few places on earth I've ever seen that would match this little lake for fishing. Thing is, if you don't know where it is, you can't find it. You have to ride horses in for a half day, get dropped off, hike for another half day, and then make a little camp by a creek, and then hike for another half day just to get to the place where you depart from the trail, and you have to know where to do it to get down to this lake. And for about 3 hours, you hike, over logs and down, steep canyons. Sometimes you get down and realize you have to come back up because you're at a dead end. And the only way to get down is there's occasional trail markers that have been put there by other hikers or by a ranger, and they'll stack 2 or 3 rocks, one on another. And they're generally 50 yards apart, and sometimes you have to search for 10 or 15 minutes to find one. And without the trail markers, you'll never arrive at your destination. And just from the time you leave the trail, it's about another 4.5 hours, maybe almost 5, just to get down to where the lake is. Very difficult, very strenuous, but the payoff is worth it. And I know some people, some of the younger people thinking, hey, you're talking about this whole multi-generational thing. Man, it's hard. Connecting with older people. I just rather hang out with, people my own age. This is hard. Yeah, it's hard, but the payoff is worth it. And those of us that are a little bit older are thinking, man, this change, I'm just comfortable. Pastor, stop asking me to get out of my comfort zone. Listen, the payoff is worth it if you'll make the journey. And I just want to share with you some trail markers that'll help you get there. In fact, without these trail markers, we will not arrive at our desired destination. We won't have a multi-generational church. And by that, I don't just mean a church that's got a youth group over here, but where you've got at least 3 generations doing life together, serving Jesus together, doing kingdom things together, because that is where God says He pours out His Spirit. That is the most effective vehicle for reaching a lost and a dying world. And I think we'll experience some things of God in our midst that we will not experience otherwise if we don't make the journey. So here's 3 trail markers for the younger people here. You need to keep these in mind, and then I'm going to share 3 trail markers for some of those in the middle and the older generations that are here that'll help you arrive at the destination. All right, young people, trail marker number 1, honor. Everybody say honor. Exodus, chapter 20 and verse 12. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's one of the 10 commandments. In the New Testament, this is referred to as the first commandment with a promise. It says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Honor your father. Honor your mother. It'll be well with you. You'll live a long time on the earth. If you don't honor them, it won't be well with you, and you may not live a long time on the earth. And it certainly is referring to, natural children with their parents, but it can and should be applied just to the spirit that young people carry toward their elders. Listen to this. It's Leviticus 19:32. Show respect to the aged. Honor the presence of an elder. Fear your God. I am God. Show respect to the aged. Honor the presence of an elder. The word honor, the Hebrew word translated honor in our Bible, literally means to esteem highly, to value, to show respect for, and to make weighty. When an older person encourages you, or instructs you, or counsels you, or corrects you, their words should be weighty to you. What they do and what they say should carry weight. Their words should never be treated lightly. I was speaking at a large conference years ago, and some of the young men came up to me and said, Bayless, we really want to, be successful in life. We want to fulfill our ministry and our calling. Well, what's the best advice you could give us? The conference was being led by a young man that was had a lot of notoriety in his country, was really being used by God. I said, okay, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. I said, you need to find this guy's father and hang around with him. I see the guy's dad had actually done a lot of the hard yards and done a lot of the heavy lifting over the years and had prepared the way for everything that was happening, but he had sort of been forgotten by this time. I said, hang around with his dad, ask him questions, get as close to the guy's old man as you can. And it was funny, their reaction. It was something that wasn't even on their radar. They hadn't even thought of it. I said, whatever he tells you, you need to consider it deeply and let it be weighty to you. You know, we talked last time when I spoke about Rehoboam's counselors, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. When the nation came together, said, look, your daddy went off the rails at the end of his life. He became an idolater. He oppressed the people. How are you going to treat us? He said, come back in 3 days. And he asked the old men to come, said, what's your counsel? And they gave wise counsel, but he rejected it. He didn't consider their words weighty. He treated what they said lightly. And then he called all the young men that he'd grown up with around him, said, what do you guys say? And he followed their counsel instead. And as a result, the nation was divided from that day forward. 10 tribes having their capital in Samaria, the other 2 tribes having their capital in Jerusalem. I had a friend that, and by the way, I'm probably going to use a few ministry examples. That's a large part of my world, so just get ready. He had adopted a particular pursuit in his ministry that I was very uncomfortable with. In fact, I thought it was wrong. I didn't think it was healthy. I didn't think it was consistent with a Christ-like character. And he was a close enough friend that I talked to him about it. We sat down and said, look, I want to talk to you about this thing that you're doing, this thing you're pursuing. I think it's wrong. And I think you're entering the danger zone. I said, have you gotten any counsel about this? He said, oh yeah. I talked to so-and-so, and I called so-and-so, and I talked to so-and-so, and I talked to so-and-so. I mentioned 4 guys. Not a single father among them. They were all young bucks like he was, you know, carrying out exploits for God, doing a good job. But getting the counsel, the perspective of an elder was not even on his radar. All right? Number 2, trail marker number 2 is act. Act. You know, John picks up this idea of at least 3 generations serving and working together. He said, I've written to you little children, I've written to you young men, I've written to you fathers. And he gives instruction and admonition to all 3 generations, but he gives the lion's share of instruction to the younger generation. Everything from forgiveness to, character and lifestyle, to being led by the Spirit, to authority in Christ, to keeping God first in your life. But he doesn't end there, because he writes 2 more letters after 1 John, 2 John and 3 John. And just turn there with me if you would. Each of these letters just have 1 chapter. And after giving this extensive instruction to the younger generations, look what he says in 2 John in verse 4. I rejoice greatly that I have found some of your children walking in truth as we receive commandment from the Father. And then 3 John, verse 4, very similar. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Not that my children listen to the truth. Not that my children come to church and agree with the truth, but that this younger generation walks in the truth. Walking denotes action. It denotes something that has been imbibed, something that's been digested and turned into lifestyle. And he said, look, I have rejoiced greatly. I have no greater joy than to see when this younger generation, when they walk in the truth. So young people, listen. Let the truth that you hear get past your head and down into your feet. We realize that as time moves on, some things will be done in a different way. Yet there are basic foundational principles that will not change. They will not morph with new technologies or alter with the changing dynamics of society. Rejoice our hearts. Let us see you on your knees. Let us see you doing some of these foundational things that brought the church where she is now. So your second trail marker, young person, is act. Walk in the truth that you hear. All right, trail marker number 3 is be aware. Be aware that your life, even in your youth, is leaving an imprint on the lives of others. Your life is impacting other people's lives, even if you're a young man or a young woman. Look with me at 1 Timothy chapter 4, if you would. 1 Timothy, the 4th chapter, and verse 12. Paul, writing to his young protege, says these words, 1 Timothy 4:12, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity." The word translated example in the original language literally means to strike with force, leaving an imprint or a mark. To strike with force, leaving an imprint or a mark. Now, some of you young people, I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. You will not recognize it. It is an old typewriter. Before we had computers and smartphones, we had these. And you'd put a sheet of paper in there. There was a ribbon with ink on it that you had to replace fairly often. And there were keys. You would type them, and those keys would come up. And a little piece of metal in the shape of a letter or a symbol would hit that ribbon with force and leave a mark, leave an imprint on the paper behind with ink. And that's how we used to write all of our letters, do all of our correspondence. I mean, when we started the church, there were not computers to use. We had typewriters, baby. And you know, it's funny. I don't know if you ever thought of it, but it's just as silly. You know, it's from the time we're small, we memorize the alphabet in sequential order, A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. And then you look at a typing board and it's set up all crazy. You have to learn how to do it. Do you know why they have the letters in the order they're in? Like on your computer, whatever you type? Because the old typewriters with the little metal keys that came up, if you type too fast, the keys would get stuck. Some of you remember that. You have to pull them apart. So they devised a way to slow people down, and so they mixed everything up so you could not type as quickly. Why don't they change that? Anyway, okay. The fact is, just like an old typewriter, you're leaving an imprint on people's lives. You are typing on the souls of people around you every day. You're typing messages on their life of who you are, what you believe, and what you value every single day, constantly. And I don't mean to lay some heavy, you better watch out trip on you if you're a young person. Not at all. Be wild, explore, discover, as Joel shared last week so brilliantly. It's your season to do that. But as you explore, and as you find the lane that God wants you to run in, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Be wild, but be good. Be creative, but be responsible. This is your time to discover, explore, to travel, and experience. But as you do, be aware that all actions have consequences. And you're always leaving a mark on the lives of others. And listen, as you make your mistakes, which you invariably will, just make sure that you make those mistakes with the right heart. And if you do, God will cover you. If you don't think it's true, look up the story of Abimelech, king of Gerar. He made a huge mistake, and God said to him, "You're a dead man." He says, "But God, my heart was right. I didn't know." And God covered him. So young people, you're going to make some mistakes, but keep in mind, be aware that you are leaving an impact on people's lives. You are leaving an imprint. Your lives do affect other people, even at your young age. All right, here's 3 trail markers for the middle-aged and for the older people. Are you ready, older folks? That wasn't too rousing, but I'm going to go right ahead anyway. Trail marker number 1 is embrace. Embrace the fact that God is using young people. It's nothing new. Young people have always played a significant role in God's plans. David was only a teen when God called him and began to use him. Jeremiah was only a youth when God gave him a word for the nation. Timothy was only a youth when the Apostle Paul entrusted him with much authority and much responsibility. When Job was in the mess that he was in, his older friends brought no wisdom, and God used Elihu, a young man, to bring wisdom to the situation. You know, last week my wife and I went to a meeting. We, through a mutual friend, we went to meet this guy that is probably one of the most significant players in the world when it comes to ministry in the persecuted church. He works in one of the most difficult nations in the world, that if it's discovered that you've been baptized, you will be immediately executed. And he is the head of an underground organization with thousands of believers in it, works in very trying circumstances, and has just done this amazing thing. And, you know, when we're at the meeting, we're told, look, you know, don't tweet, no social media. It's just too dangerous, even if this guy's name gets out. So he even uses a pseudonym. And so I'm expecting, you know, we're sitting and I'm waiting. They go, okay, he must be back in the wings. My friend's going to introduce him to come out. I'm expecting this bespectacled, you know, old gray-headed guy with a thick accent, you know, to come out and talk about what they're doing. He says, okay, let me introduce him. And he's sitting right by us. It's this young guy with a ponytail. And we're like, what? And he spoke perfect English. And I thought, for the first 5 minutes, I didn't hear anything he said. I just couldn't get my head around this guy. You know, I mean, it just was, I just realized there's something in me that I just kind of had this mindset that if God is, you know, using this world shaker in this incredibly dangerous and faith-filled environment, and you got to have faith to do what this guy's doing, I figured it would just be this old, you know, weathered, tested guy, but it wasn't. It was a young guy with a ponytail. He actually looked cool. Listen. Embrace the fact that God always has, is now, and always will be using young people. And number 2, your second trail marker, remember. Remember that God still looks at the heart. You look at a young person, you see inexperience. You see someone that's untested. You see tattoos and a top knot. God, however, sees the heart. Thirdly and finally, third trail marker for those in the older generations is rejoice. Rejoice in the successes of the younger generations. I think the older generations must guard their hearts against jealousy and resentment when the younger generations go past them in achievement and in influence. Do you remember when Joseph had his dreams? His father Jacob rebuked him. In fact, I read to you Genesis 37, verses 9 through 11. It says this, then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I've dreamed another dream. This time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you've dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Jacob's first response was he recoiled at the thought, who do you think you are? You think you're going to be bigger in influence than I am? You think God's going to use you more than He's used me? The grandson of Abraham? Who do you think you are? And the older brothers got jealous and resentful. Listen, we shouldn't get resentful, nor should we be threatened by the big dreams of the young people in our midst and in our life. We ought to encourage them. In fact, better yet, we need to help them build. You know, one of the things that Harrison and I enjoy together is we golf. And he picked up the game when he was 15. I taught him everything that I knew. And for a couple of years, I could soundly thrash him. It was glorious. But somewhere in his 17th year, he ran by me, played for his high school team, and, you know, I didn't get mad when he striped a 300-yard drive down the middle of the fairway. Just the other guys in the tee box said, "It's my boy. Yeah, it's my son." I didn't get mad when he got deadly with his short irons or when his putter caught fire. I said, "Hey, that's my kid. I taught him how to golf." You know, I rejoice in the fact that he has a good golf game. I didn't get resentful and say, "Well, I'm not going to play with you anymore." I enjoy getting out there with him, and we ought to have that same heart, you know, when it comes to the young people, because frankly, we have been called together. We've been called to do life together, called to serve in God's kingdom together. The journey will not always be easy, but we can make it if we do it together. Well, I hope that you were blessed by the message today. I trust that you got something out of it, something useful, something practical, something that can help you navigate life. And listen, you know, God, He's interested in us. He's certainly interested in us and our spiritual lives, but He's interested in the everyday things as well. He is a God who supplies our needs. So as you go forward today, just carry that thought with you. God loves you, and He's interested in the smallest details of your life, spiritual and material. We'll see you next time. God bless.
One person catches the vision. Others join in. As others are included, using their gifts and influence, good progress can be made together. In the church, there is only steady and lasting progress as each generation builds up, supports, and encourages the next. In his book, From Generation to Generation, Bayless Conley outlines the role, responsibility, and opportunity each generation has to connect and build God's church together. Glean from Bayless's experience and practical advice. Use the information on the screen now to order your copy of From Generation to Generation. Thank you for watching Answers with Bayless Conley. For more information and inspiration, visit AnswersBC.org.